Pastor Nick this morning, because we do go past a handful of days that we've known each other.
Yes, we do.
That's one of the things.
40 years or 35 years.
Yes, at least that. And I always think of you as a young man, but I'm glad I've got a little reality check that you haven't caught up with me, but we're getting older. And as you get older, you find you have a lot of experiences, and I've kept up to date pretty much with what you've been doing over the last handful of years. What is your current role?
I actually have 3 different hats that I wear. I'm the Director of Public Affairs, Religious Liberty for the South Pacific Division. I'm also the Associate Director of the Ministry and Strategy team, and I'm also a Youth Liaison for the South Pacific Division. So 3 different hats, but my favourite one is the Youth Liaison role. So I've got one finger left in youth ministry still, which is lovely, which is great.
So you've got lots of spare time, obviously.
Not a lot of spare time, but when I do get a chance to do something fun, I usually hang around with my wife, and we do work in the garden actually. We're trying to do up our garden now. It's a big job.
Now, I'm really thrilled to know this man, because last year I gave him a phone call. I said, Nick, can you put me in the picture? We are aiming to raise some money for Bibles for PNG.
Yes.
And as you probably are aware, this conference of around 1,200 odd people raised $16,300 odd.
Phenomenal.
Which got over 2,000 Bibles for the Madang area. And I asked Nick about the cost, and like everything else, of recent time the cost has gone up, and I put it to the regional that for 8 hot drinks, hot Milos, we could actually put 10 Bibles into the hands of the people.
Absolutely.
At that stage that was true, but sort of inflation was caught up to a little bit. But it was really fantastic, Nick. Thank you for just doing the little go-between. You put me in the picture, you arranged for the division to cover the cost of freight.
Yes.
Yes, I'm glad to hear
We
yes.
paid that.
Yeah.
We paid the freight, and we ordered 200,000 Bibles, but we specifically sent them to Madang, the ones you were allocated. And this is actually the Bible. It is the latest print run. This one, they actually asked for New King James. So the other ones were New Living Translation, but they've asked for New King James, and we've done that. And there are 4 40-foot containers of Bibles arrived in Lae about 2 months ago. And they were full of Bibles, and then another 40,000, that was 100,000 Bibles. And then 40,000 Bibles went to Moresby, and then we sent 40,000 Bibles to Suva in Fiji for TPUM for Christ. And we've sent 20,000 Bibles to Australia in Sydney, and we sent 600 of those Bibles down here to Tasmania, and they've been distributed through the churches. But I'm hoping that you've got some at Rosny, because I'm hoping to do some training this afternoon. So if anybody knows where those Bibles are, we would be really happy to know. If they're not here already, we have to go and get them from the conference office, because I want to make sure you've got some here this afternoon.
So God is good, isn't he?
Amen.
All the time, God is good. Thank you, Nick. It's a pleasure to see you here this morning, and I know that the words will be something that will be meat in due season. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. And you're still looking strong, bro. You're doing well. It's great to be here today at Rosny and to meet up with friends and family that I have caught up with over a long time. Some young girls down there that I've known well, and some other family members that are down the back there, and lovely couples that I've had a chance to catch up with while we're here in Tasmania. I'm staying with Ross and Faye at the moment, and they're really looking after us very well. Thank you, Ross and Faye, for that. But I just want to share this morning something that's very close to my heart. I'm not sure where I'm supposed to be standing. Am I in the right place or am I in the wrong place? I don't want the feedback to affect the talk. But anyway, I want to talk about something that's very important to me this morning, and that is, we call it the journey of adolescence. And this is the journey that every young person has to take from being a child to becoming an adult. And of course, you know that most of you would know that I've worked with young people now for 30 years. And it's a burden for me to work with our young people. I love our young people, and we have so many beautiful young people. We don't want to lose any of them. Is that right? Yeah. We cannot afford to lose our beautiful, precious young people. We've got to look after them all. And so this morning, We're going to be working through this together, and I want to start off with this lovely passage coming from Luke chapter 18, verse 16. And this is something, it's a great little dialogue between Jesus and his disciples. And he said, then Jesus called for the children and said to the disciples, let the children come to me and don't stop them. Now I've got a question for you this morning. Why do you think the disciples were trying to stop the kids from coming to talk to Jesus? Why would the disciples try to stop the kids? You can talk back to me. The less important? Yeah. Anything else they do wrong? Disturbing and irritating and noisy. Running around when they're supposed to be sitting silently. Just causing trouble. And so the disciples thought that they were not important enough, and Jesus was such a VIP that he couldn't spare time for children. But I love what Jesus said. He said, don't you stop the kids from coming to see me. And then he makes this beautiful statement. For the kingdom of God belongs to those who are like these children. So the second question I got for you this morning is, what is it about a child that's so close to the kingdom of God? Sorry? They're innocent. Yes. Anything else? They're trusting. They're trusting. They're, sorry? Dependent. They will just love you, and they'll listen to you, and they'll come and you can grab them in your arms and give them a cuddle, and they just love people, and they're just so beautiful. Children are actually beautiful people. And when Jesus looked at children, he said, this is what I want everybody to be like. Just like those kids. Be trusting, be loving, be kind, be faithful. Be open to the teachings of God. You know, you can talk to children and ask them if they love Jesus. Say, yes, I love Jesus. It's just beautiful to see the way kids respond about Jesus. And so this morning we're going to be looking at some principles about how we can help our young people. And I've got a quote here from a book named Gospel Workers. And I want to just share with you, particularly paying attention to the parts of this little passage that's in red. And I'd like you to read the passages that are in red, and I'll read the other bits, okay? And I'll talk about it with you. The youth need more than a casual notice, more than an occasional word of encouragement. They need what? That means more than just when you walk past them smiling or saying, hey, how you going? It means spending time with a young person, investing quality time in children, working with them according to who they are and where they're at their life stages. Getting to know them, finding their name. Learning a young person's name is so valuable today. When you see a person walk past, say, how you going, John? How you going, Kerry? How you going, Mara? Just mentioning their name is one of the most beautiful things you can do for a young person. Okay, he only whose heart is filled with love and sympathy will be able to teach or reach those youth who are what? You've probably seen those kids at church, or they're out in the car park when you want them to be in here, or they're causing trouble in the foyer, they're making too much noise, and people are asking them to come inside. They don't want to come inside, they're just down there just doing their own thing. And it can be annoying. And some people want to go and grab them by the ear and pull them in and all this sort of stuff. But you know what? I love what this statement says. They are apparently careless and indifferent. Often young people are way more attentive than we think they are. And they're listening to what we're saying, but they just don't want you to know that. They're just pretending to be careless and indifferent. Not all can be helped in the same way. God deals with each according to his what? You know, we have 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, boy, girl, boy. And our daughter was particularly well behaved when she was growing up. She was beautiful. She would do what we asked her to do. When we asked her to do chores in the house, she would do them faithfully. When we asked her to get ready for Pathfinders, she'd get dressed up beautifully for Pathfinders. It was just amazing. But the boys, on the other hand, they were not quite the same. When you asked them to do chores, they'd look at you like, why would we do chores? What would make us do chores? Even if we offered them money, they didn't do chores. We tried to bribe them with money and little incentive schemes with stars on the thing. Nothing worked. But gradually, as they grew up, they became more responsible. But the thing is this, some kids are just well behaved. And they're beautiful. Some kids will get the Award of Excellence for Pathfinders. Other kids will turn up and they're running around and they're causing havoc. In fact, one of our boys said to us, if you come to Pathfinders when I'm there, I'm going to give you hell. So we stayed away at that point in time so that other people could look after him. But, you know, we have to work with each of them according to their own disposition and their personality. We must cooperate with God. Often those whom we do what? And because... You know, I want to tell you, often those rebellious kids that are causing trouble or the ones that are making a lot of noise, you know, when they're supposed to be quiet, they're actually future leaders. In fact, they could be a pastor or a youth director one day. So look after the rebels in your church because they're actually decent young guys, just some of them are bored. And a lot of trouble with boys particularly is they've got a lot of energy. And it's hard to expect boys to sit in a church for an hour without moving. That's just about impossible for some boys, even for some men, to be honest. I love the way it says here that we judge them from their outward appearance. And often we look at young people and they're not dressing the way we think they should be dressed. Maybe their clothes aren't appropriate for church, or maybe they're wearing something that you feel is a little bit skimpy or something like that. And we can very easily see a person like that as a trouble. But I want to tell you, they are beautiful treasures in our midst, and we've got to look after them. Okay, we're almost finished. They'll repay all the efforts bestowed on them. There must be what? That's right. We're going to be looking at studying of the problem of how we deal with our youth. More earnest prayer for wisdom that is needed in dealing with minds. And so this morning we're going to talk a little bit about the notion of individuation. And Jason heard all this the other day. He knows all about this. We spent 3 or 4 hours together chatting about this stuff. Individuation is an American word, but it basically means becoming your own person. It means growing up and becoming who God made you to be. It's basically allowing God to speak to us directly and allowing us to sort of find our own identity. And it's really important for every young person to be able to become their own person. And there's 3 tasks that every young person has to deal with and navigate as they go from being a child to being an adult. And the first one is to get a positive sense of their identity. And this is, who am I? The question is, who am I? And every young person is asking, who am I? I'm a boy, I'm a girl, I'm from Queensland, I'm a carpenter, I like surfing. We have all these different ways of putting tags on ourselves. I'm a pastor, I'm a bank accountant, I'm a school teacher. To look at ourselves, and the good thing we want is for young people to feel positive about who they are, that they have a positive sense of their identity. We don't want them to feel bad about who they are. And as a church community, we want to help our young people feel very positive about who they're growing up to be. The second one is to get a sense of purpose and autonomy. And that's basically, do my choices matter? Do I have a purpose? Do I have any personal power? And as young people are growing up, you know, we can assign power to a young person, or we can take power away from a young person. When a young person comes to us and asks us a question, you know, sometimes they ask us really crazy questions, like, what's wrong with marijuana? Why can't I smoke marijuana? What's wrong with that? What's wrong with sex before marriage? And they'll ask us a question, and we can either say, that's a really good question. Let me sit down, I'll explain that to you. Let's talk about that together. In doing that, you're taking their question seriously. Or you can say, don't be so stupid, go and do your homework and put those dishes in the sink. What you've just done then is you've said, I've got the power here, you have no power, you just do what I tell you to do. And we diminish the person. We diminish their sense of worth. And so we've got to be careful how we actually respond when it comes to our young people growing up to become adults. We've got to allow them in their own space and in their own way to find their purpose. The third one is to get a healthy sense of belonging, and that is, where do I fit in? And we'd like every young person to think that they fit in at home, in their bedroom, where they've got their some ribbons from their athletics, and they've got a basketball, and they've got some posters on the wall and some books and their favourite clothes hanging in the wardrobe, and they feel safe there. That's their sanctuary. That's a beautiful thing for a young person. They need to be able to feel at home and feel safe and feel like they belong at home. Everybody loves them at home. And at church as well. We'd like them to think that when they come to church on Sabbath, they come to Sabbath school and go there with all their friends the same age as them, and everybody says, "Hey, how you going, John? Great to have you here. Fantastic that you're here. Come on down, come and sit down, and we're going to enjoy ourselves together." And they feel at home in the church. We want that to happen. We want them to feel belonging in God's church family. But I can tell you, not everybody feels at home at home. There's more than 100,000 people in Australia living on the streets because it's actually safer to be on the streets than it is to be living at home. More damage is happening to them at home than if they're living on the streets. And that's a really sad comment on Australia. Not everybody feels belonging in church either. And that's a sad thing too. So when we talk about the journey of adolescence, the timing and the duration of adolescent journey has changed over the years. So for most of the history of the world, adolescence starts in puberty and ends in culture. And so up until a child reaches puberty, they're seen as a child pretty well internationally. And for most of the history of the world, young people reach puberty in their mid-teens, 14.5, maybe 15, in some countries slightly higher than lower. But that's a global stat, about 14 and a half years of age for most of the history of the world. And very quickly, they were seen as an adult by the age of maybe 16. Can anybody tell me why they were seen as an adult so quickly? They had to work. They had to get a job or working with their dad. Most boys, for the history of the world, most boys followed the footsteps of their father. So if their father's a stonemason or a fisherman or a carpenter or a farmer, that's what the boy was doing all day, working with his dad. And as soon as he was strong enough and big enough, he's contributing to the family, because for the history of the world, it was a whole day's job just raising enough money and food to get by for the next day. Most people lived in poverty, and so you're struggling from one day to the next just to survive. And most young girls would be helping their mum in the garden or at home washing clothes or cooking and doing food preparation, getting the firewood ready for the fire, basically preparing just to keep the house going smoothly. So there was working. There's another good one as well. Can anybody tell me another reason why maybe they were seen as adults really quickly? Limited education. Yes, most kids would finish school, primary school, and they'd be working because that's what they had to do. Sorry? There was no teen culture. Oh, you're getting warm right there. But yes, definitely, there was no real teen culture as such. Kids just grew up and became adults really quickly. But there's a big one that no one's mentioned yet. They married earlier. Most young boys and girls, parents were having discussions as they were reaching puberty, and parents were organising the marriage for them. So as soon as they were old enough to get married, they were betrothed to each other, and then the plans would be happening for their wedding. And so most young people would be getting married in their mid to late teens. And so they'd be having children, no contraception. So next thing you know, you're a mother and a father, and you're full speed ahead looking after your family. And that's been the case for most of the history of the world. But more recently, as we come down towards today, the age when young people are reaching puberty is dropping, and there's lots of reasons for that. Good nutrition, hormones in food, and just better health in general. Young children are having babies as young as 7 or 8 years of age now. But the age at which they're seen as adults has stretched out a little bit. So why is that the case? They won't leave home. It's fascinating. And the question is, why aren't they leaving home? Costs a lot of money to leave home. They find out very quickly how much it costs to leave home. It's a very expensive exercise, leaving home. But there's reasons why they're not leaving home. So they're financially dependent upon their parents. Why is that? They're studying. Kevin Rudd said everybody had to stay at school till they were 17. and finish year 12. So all the school teachers would be happy about that. He was trying to keep unemployment figures down, and so he kept them all at school. But even when young people leave school now, about 50% of Australian young people are going on to university or some kind of further education. After World War II, 3% of people went on to further education. Now it's 50%. So there's a lot of people staying at home longer, doing their education, and then if you fail a couple of subjects and decide you're going to have a gap year and go to Canada for the ski season, or go to Japan, or go and live in London for a couple of years and just enjoy yourself, then you come back and you might finish your degree in 5 or 6 or 7 years. So, you know, if you left school in 17 and you're graduating from your undergrad degree in your early 20s. And some people are even going on to do their masters straight after their undergrad, so they're in their mid-20s before they actually graduate. And if you're a doctor, you're going to probably do 8 to 10 years of study when you finish school. So basically, a lot of young people are studying longer, and so they are not financially contributing to the family or to society. They're actually still a student, and that's great. I mean, we want our kids to be smart. We want them to get education. It's one of the blessings of this country. What are the other things? Any other reason why we would not necessarily see them as adults? They marry later. Absolutely. You know, the average age of girls to get married in Australia is about 30, and the average age of boys is about 32. And so what's the philosophy is these days that your 20s is a party decade. You can just enjoy yourself. You can go and travel. You can just relax, go on a bit of a thing around the world, do one of these global trials with a backpack and just enjoy yourself all over the place, and, you know, take your time through uni. And even there's a whole bunch of young people today who've moved away from uni and they're becoming entrepreneurs. They're just creating their own business. Everybody wants to be an influencer today. They're all hoping that they're going to get the numbers up on Instagram and start getting money from Instagram or who knows what else. And so there's this feeling amongst young people today that actually being an adult is not that much fun. In fact, I've met young guys in their 20s who say to me, I just want to be the boy. I just want to be the boy. And there was a series of men's magazines that were declining in sales, and they got some consultants in to try and work out why they were losing sales in their magazines. And the consultants said to them, you're pitching at the wrong audience. You're pitching at men. You need to pitch at boys and see what happens. And they did that. They changed the layout and content and made it more boy-friendly. Sales went back up through the roof again, because young guys today are seeing themselves as boys. And they say that women mature into adulthood in their mid-20s. Boys become adults in their mid-40s, just their toys get a lot more expensive as they're growing a lot. But what this has meant is that basically the need to grow up is not so much there anymore. The need to get married is not much there anymore. People don't see marriage as this thing you have to do in your teens anymore. And so it's changed. And so there's this kind of, you call it midland where they're not children anymore, but they're not necessarily doing the things we would expect an adult to do. And I see guys in their late 20s, early 30s walking around with their cap on backwards and a skateboard under their arm with baggy pants. I think, bro, you should be married with 3 kids by now, but you're out there just having fun. I think, yeah, fair enough. The other thing that's changing too is family trees. This is my family tree. My mum and dad stayed together until my dad passed away. My mum's still alive. She's nearly 90. Both of their parents stayed alive until they died and stayed together. And so my family was very stable, you'd call it. If I wanted to know who I was, I'd look to my dad. My dad was a carpenter. He said to me, when you leave school, you're going to be a carpenter, which is exactly what I did. I did 6 years of building with my dad. All of his brothers were builders. All mum's brothers were builders. So it was really a no-brainer. I was going to be a carpenter for the rest of my life. But today, family trees and family structures are looking a lot different. And there's a lot of different models of family out there now that make it a bit more complicated for our young people to try and work out who they are. And if they, we've got young children today whose father might be living in a different city, or could be living in New Zealand, or could be living in the Pacific. And the mother could be living with a boyfriend, or she could be living with a second husband. And so for a young guy to try and work out who he's going to be, he's trying to look at, so do I look at my grandfather? Do I look at my stepdad? Or who do I actually want to be? And there's a record number of children being raised by grandparents today because the parents have just signed off. They're just out there doing their own thing, and the grandparents are looking after the kids today. So society's changed and families have changed in the last few decades. And there was a guy named James Comer who did some research in America, and he looked at the skills needed for young people to get the job they wanted to get. So to get a good result in your high school, to get to a good university, to get a good career, you had to have better social skills, communication skills, English, maths, literacy, computer skills, financial management skills, time management skills, conflict management skills, all on the increase. But at the same time, James Comer found that the ongoing adult support offered to young people was on the decrease. So the amount of time that a dad would spend with his boy fixing a lawnmower in the backyard in the shed is on the decrease. The amount of time they spend together, going fishing or playing soccer in the backyard, that's diminishing. The amount of time mums spend with their daughters is diminishing as well. And James Comer said that these two trends have created a serious problem in our country. There's a gap between the skills that are being needed and the adult guidance being offered to young people today. And that's a sad reality. But praise God, there are things we can do about this. And so there are two things we can all do for young people. The first one is to offer them social capital. And social capital is any time you spend with a young person, sitting down beside them, asking them their name, what did you do on the weekend, just having a chat with them, how did you go on your Christmas holidays, how did you go with maths, how's your new push bike, just any question at all you want to ask them, just let them know you care. Let them know you're interested in a young person. That's very good news for a young person. The more adults and people take an interest and invest in a young person, that's really good news for a young person. The second one is social scaffolding. And this is any skill or talent or ability that you can share with a young person. So if you can teach your kids how to do their shoelaces, if you can teach them how to stack a dishwasher, teach them how to use a camping oven, camp stove, and set up a tent, use a map and compass, fill out a tax return, how to do a job application, how to fill out a university application. Anything you can teach a young person is good news for a young person. And the researchers have found that the more social scaffolding and the more social capital a young person has, the less vulnerable they are, the less at-risk behaviour they get involved in. But the less social capital, the less social scaffolding, the more vulnerable they are. Unwanted pregnancies, crime, ending up in courtrooms, it's on the increase. Direct correlation between the two. So if you want to help our young people, spend time with them, give them social capital and social scaffolding. The other thing that happens too with a lot of young people, when they grow up and get to high school particularly, they actually trade their parents for their friends when it comes to all the discussions. And so they start having discussions with their mates at school about everything. They talk about everything at lunchtime with a group of 4 or 5 other kids. And the alpha male or the alpha female will be setting the agenda, will be setting the tone of that group. And so they talk about movies, music, gaming, parents, sex, alcohol, drugs, pornography, religion, God. It's all discussed at school. And often the parents do not know what's being discussed at school. That's why we call it the world beneath. And a lot of young people have different levels of currency. Some kids have high levels of currency. They're like the alpha male and the alpha female, the most popular kids at school. They are talented, they're funny, they're good looking, or they're athletic, or they're very academically smart, and they're just really popular. They're your number ones. And everybody wants to be seen with those alpha males and females. Then you come down the scale to the mid-range with kids still pretty popular, and they might be really good at sport, or maybe they're very funny, or they're very good looking, whatever. And then gradually you work your way down to the lower levels, to the 8s, 9s and 10s who aren't popular, who might be sitting on their own at lunchtime at school. And sad. But people will use their currency, whatever they've got, to be accepted, to get belonging, to get social status. And if it's their humour, or if it's their looks, or if it's their sporting ability, that's what they'll use to try and be accepted in amongst a school fraternity. And often they have what we call multiple candles burning. And that's where they come to church on Sabbath, and we dress up nicely and beautifully. We've got our Sabbath clothes on, and they're singing. No disrespect to the people that were singing this morning, but they're up the front being they've got a candle burning. I'm a good Seventh-day Adventist. This is me, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. And then when they go home at night, they blow the candle out, and they go out to town with their friends, and they light a different candle, and it's called I'm a Gangster. And they're in town, the language changes, their diet changes, their movie watching changes, and they're out there in the wild with all the gang, with all the boys, and having a bit of fun. And then when they go home on Sunday morning, they wake up, I'm a son or I'm a daughter candle. And this goes on, it's multiple selves. And it's an attempt to be accepted and find belonging in different social contexts. And with my youngest boy, Josh, he had 2 Instagram accounts. One we were allowed to look at, the other one we were not allowed to look at because there was different conversations happening in that other Instagram account. And that's just life. But the dream, and of course with all the social media platforms now, you can have multiple identities depending on what you want to talk about and who you want to talk to and who you're following. But the ideal would be is that we bring those identities together, that we give our young people enough resilience and enough confidence and enough groundedness and centeredness that they're going to be the same person all week. Saturday at church, Saturday night in town, they pray at church, they pray at McDonald's, they go to uni on Tuesday, they're a Christian at uni, and we want to see that resilience. And our identity ultimately is forged by Jesus Christ. That's where our value comes from, amen? We don't get our value by what we wear or what car we're driving or what the house looks like or our clothing or our sunglasses. We get our identity from Jesus Christ, and he keeps us safe and secure. So our job as an adult community and as families is to surround our young people with those positive messages about who they are, centered in Jesus Christ. So a couple of theorists for you. Some of you might have read these guys. Yuri Bronfenbrenner did some research back in the day, and he looked at children and the tiers of influence that actually impact a child's life. And he found that the most significant and important level of influence is loving parents. If a child has 2 loving parents that love them, believe in them, care for them, feed them, nourish them, and just give them opportunities to grow and benefit, that child's doing very well. They're going to be happy with their life. If they don't have loving parents, or maybe they've got one loving parent or living with grandparents, whatever, then it's non-parental, committed adults and peers. So that's uncles, aunties, grandparents, cousins, Pathfinder leader, soccer coach, school teachers, just people that love them and care for them and believe in them. If they don't have that level of support, then it's non-parental, non-committed adults and peers. And that's where a school teacher might walk past and say, how are you going, occasionally, and they don't have a lot of networks, people don't contact them very often. They might get a card from an uncle at Christmas time or something, but not a lot of input. And if they don't have that, they are left at the broader media and ecology. They're basically on their own. And many young people today are running around the racetrack of life, and there's nobody in the stands saying anything to them and cheering them on. So this is where some young people can watch a violent movie. It doesn't really impact them because they know they're a loving person. They've been loved all their life. They don't feel angry or whatever. But another young person who doesn't have that love in their life will watch a violent movie, and they'll go out and they'll act out what they saw on the movie. And they'll start playing out what they saw, and that's why they end up in jail and juvenile justice centres. I'm a part of a Christian ministry team that goes to the Frank Baxter Juvenile Justice Centre at Carryong, just up from the road from where I live on the Central Coast. There's 105 boys there, aged between 16 to 21. Those boys are all either waiting for their court case to come up, or they've been tried and they're just sitting it out for the next 3 to 5 years until they go into the big house as adults. And a lot of those boys, we go and talk to them, and our motto is not to try and convert them. Our motto is just to be there for them, to let them know somebody cares about them. So we buy pizzas for them, and we buy cornettos and stuff. Can't have anything with timber in it or anything like that. It has to be just paper. And basically we go up there and let them know we care. And one of those boys, I was talking to him, I said, so tell us about your life, and where's your family and that? He said, the last time I saw my father, he tried to push me out in front of a car. And I thought, man, that's not a good father. That's a sad model. So this is where Loving parents are so valuable today. Another guy named John Bowlby, who was grew up in a rich home in England, very wealthy parents. They had busy social lives. They travelled a lot with their work, and they didn't spend a lot of time with John, so they employed a nanny to look after him, a tutor. And that woman fed him. She got him ready for school. She helped him with his homework. She got him ready for bed. She took him to the doctor when he was sick. She looked after him for years. And when his mother died at the age of 18, it didn't really impact John that much because he didn't know his mother that well. But when his mother passed away, his dad said, well, you don't need a tutor anymore. You're 18 now. You're an adult, so we're going to sack the tutor. That just about killed John Bowlby because that woman had become like his mum. He'd identified with her. So John had all these questions in his head. He went to university and studied psychology, and he came up with the term primary attachment figures. You might have heard that term. He became the head of the American Psychological Society for like 20 years. He was a big shot in the psychological world. And he talked about primary attachment figures. And for most families, the person that does the most heavy lifting in a child's life is the mother. The mother is the one who sets the scene for that child. All the basic disciplines: go to bed, get out of bed, do your shoelaces, put the dishes on the sink, comb your hair, do your homework. All the stuff that kids have to learn is usually done by the mother. The father plays a role too, but it's the mother who does the most of the caring and loving of most children. And you cannot love a child too much. The more love you give them, security, nutrition, good clothing, whatever you can give them, pour it on them. Let them know they can reach for the stars. And then what happens when they reach puberty? There's 3 stages of puberty, 3 stages of adolescence: early, mid, and late. And when kids hit their puberty and they're sort of 11, 12 years of age, their brain starts to change. And if you've studied Piaget and some of those theorists, you'll know that they get formal operational thinking. They start to reflect. They start to have their own opinions. They start to challenge their mum and dad. They start to argue at home, and it becomes a little bit conflicted. And it's a tough time for parents. And kids start pushing the parents away when they're in their early teens, 12, 13, 14. It's hard work because all your life you've had these kids and you've been loving on them, and you sit down at bedtime and they tell you, Dad, I love you, you're the best dad in the world, and you read stories to them and you have prayers with them and you just invest in them and they just love you. Then all of a sudden, it all sort of changes, really almost like overnight. And I remember Josh, our youngest boy, when he was 14, I went into his bedroom one night to say goodnight to him, and I said, had a little chat, had a bit of a Bible reading and had a prayer. And I went to kiss him on the forehead. He said, Dad, what are you kissing me for? I'm not gay. And I said, oh. He kind of caught me by surprise. And I said, well, I'm not gay either, but I've been kissing you since you came home from hospital. He said, but you don't have to keep doing it because I don't like it anymore. But what Josh was actually trying to say to me was, I'm not that little boy anymore. I'm a young man now. Stop treating me like a little kid, Dad. I don't like it anymore. And I had to let him grow up. Had to recognise he's growing up. He's changing. And our daughter, Caitlin, when she was a bit older, she was about 17, when we had this bit of a disagreement one night in the lounge room. It was not over anything major. It was a fairly insignificant discussion point, but I disagreed with her on it. And she looked at me and she said, Dad, you have no idea who I am. And I looked at her, I thought, I've got a pretty good idea I know who you are. But what she was trying to tell me was, I'm not that little girl anymore. I'm a young woman now. Stop treating me like a little kid. And we have to recognise that our kids are growing up. And that autocratic relationship we had when they were young and 5 and 6 and 8 years old, when you have to tell them, go to bed, it's past your bedtime, get to bed. All that sort of changes when they're in their teens. You have to sort of re-navigate and renegotiate the terms of the relationship as they're getting into their teenage years. And it's tough work for parents. But let me tell you, it's also tough work for the kids because they're trying to establish themselves. What they're actually trying to do is develop their own sense of belonging, their own sense of, this is my world now, this is my life, and I'm going to live my life. And they start questioning things about us as parents. They start questioning what's happening in a church. And in the mid-adolescence, 14 to 15 to 19 to 20, that's when they start experimenting. And this is a tough time for parents as well. This is when they come home with the police, or they end up in a courtroom, or there's an unwanted pregnancy, or we find out that they're down the clubs on a Friday night, or we find out that they're smoking or drinking, and it can be a trauma for parents. It can be trauma for families. It's also a trauma for the church, because these kids that we've raised and gone through Pathfinders and had all these fantastic memories with, suddenly they're not coming to church as much. They're hit and miss. They only show up once every 3 or 4 weeks. And it's a problem. And we know they're doing stuff that probably we don't agree with, and they know it as well. That's why they're starting to get a bit dodgy. And what the easiest thing for us to do as a church and as families is to kind of push them away. And there's lots of ways that we can let a young person know they're not welcome. You don't even have to say anything. All you have to do is walk past and just don't say hi to them. Just walk past and don't look at them. They've got antennas really high. Their senses are way up there when it comes to how we treat them as young people. And so the easiest option is to just sort of ostracise them and say, look, we don't, you're clubbing on a Friday night. Don't hang around with John anymore, guys. We know that he's out there in the clubs. He's out there doing his thing. But the more important thing, the more valuable thing we can do for young people that are in that space is to ring them up and say, I know that maybe right now church is not really the place you want to be, or maybe you're not finding it easy to come to church at the moment, but I want you to know that I'll pick you up in town. If you're in trouble on Friday night, you give me a call and I'll come down and I'll pick you up if you've got no money, or if you're drunk and you're in trouble. Give me a call, I'll pick you up and I'll bring you home. You see, young people, when they're in that space, they haven't given up on God. They haven't said, I'm no longer an Adventist. They're just out there with their friends, and their friends are asking them to try things they've never tried before, and they're going to places with their friends, and they don't realise half the time what's going on. They haven't written God off. They haven't written the church off. They still actually believe everything they've been taught as kids. But if the church says to them, you are no longer accepted here, they interpret that as God's written me off. And then they're way more likely just to disappear into the woodwork and we'll never see them again. But if they know the church loves them despite what they're doing, they know what they're doing is wrong. They're not stupid. They know they're pushing the envelope. If the church reaches out to them and say, hey, we want you to stay. Come back to the social. We're having a social night. We're doing this. We've got pizzas and videos. Come back and be a part of our church. Then that message is so strong, it lets them know that God hasn't written them off. The good news is too, when they get to their late adolescence, they actually come home again. When they're in their mid-adolescence, they think they know everything. And it's difficult because, it's the difference between juniors and teens at big camp. If you say to juniors at big camp, sing louder, juniors will rattle the windows. They'll be screaming with volume. Then you go to the teen tent and you say, sing louder. The teens look at you like, who are you to tell me to sing louder? I'll sing as loud or softly as I feel like, and if I don't feel like singing, I won't sing at all. Don't you tell me how to sing. It's just a totally different attitude. But the good news is that when they reach their late teens, early 20s, they start to come home again. They start to have great conversations with their parents. They start to have good conversations with us at church. And if they know the church loves them, they'll be sitting back in church with their girlfriend, with their boyfriend. They'll be a deacon one day, or an elder one day, or a youth director one day. Look after them. Now, the other thing that's really important is too that the role of the father is critical in their teens, because every boy is trying to work out what it looks like to be a man. And if his father is a good God-fearing father who reads his Bible and prays and is involved at church and leading in Pathfinders and doing all this stuff with the young people, then that boy looks at his dad and says, well, that's what it means to be a man. And if he's treating his wife with respect, telling her she's beautiful, telling her he loves her in front of the kids and all that, then the boy says, that's how you treat your wife. And the girls are looking at their dad saying, what sort of a man should I marry? And if her father is loving towards her and tells her she's a princess, that she's beautiful, she can reach for the stars, and he's respectful to her, he's respectful to his wife, that young girl is going to reach for some guy who treats her the same way as her father did. But if that father's neglectful, if the father's not around, or if he's abusive and hurtful and diminishing and telling the kids you're stupid, you're ridiculous, you're never going to amount to anything, then that young boy thinks, well, that's what it's like to be a man. And the young girl says, well, that's what sort of a guy I'd probably end up marrying. And that's where you get generational abuse just being passed down from one generation to the next. So it's critical that we have godly men as role models for young people. And thank God for the church, where we've actually got solid, biblically based adults. Godly men are one of the rarest things on this earth today. There's more women in the church than men, and godly women play a key role as well. But the men play a really critical role in teenagers. And the thing is that the more trust and communication and closeness we can build up with kids when they're small, we can trade on that like a bank account when they get to their teens. And you can have those hard conversations with them when they're teenagers. So basically, the value of the extended family, the value of people supporting a young person as they walk across that tightrope of adolescence is really critical. We want to create a safety net of adults and people that love them, look after them and keep them safe as they're transitioning through their teen years. And you know, when you think about Jesus, when Jesus was out there on the street with people, he deliberately chased after those people that were outcasts. He deliberately chased down the madmen. They went across the lake deliberately to go and have that interview with the guy that was demon-possessed. And the guy wanted to hang out with Jesus. He said, "Can I get in the boat?" And he said, "No, you go back and tell your family what I've just done for you." He became an evangelist. And the woman at the well, the same thing. She was probably at the lowest social strata in that whole society, in that little village. And Jesus turned her into an evangelist because he saw something in her that we don't see. The woman caught in the act of adultery, Zacchaeus the tax collector, the lepers, publicans and sinners, even Judas. Jesus actually reached out to these people and let them know that they were welcome in his kingdom. And we need to do the same thing with our young people, even the ones that are giving us trouble. Hang on there with them and look after them. So I want to just finish with this illustration of values today. And I want to talk about how core values are really important. Everything revolves around the values that we have as people. And so around the values, we have things called principles. The principles support the values that we uphold as a church and as a community in Australia. Around the principles, we have standards, and those standards support the principles that support the key values that we have as a community. And around the standards, we have rules. The rules support the standards that support the principles that support the values. So let me explain this to you. If we value life, we think life is important, then if life is a value in Australia, life is actually a key value. We value life. And so because of that, we spend hundreds of millions of dollars on hospitals, ambulances, nursing degrees, medical degrees, dentistry degrees, psychology degrees, because life is really important. So we have a principle of supporting life structures. And around that principle, we have standards like licenses and speed limits. And so if you want to get a license today, you have to go and do 120 hours of supervised driving before you get your Ps. And there's a good reason for that, because most of the fatalities on the road in Australia are P-platers. So we build in a safety net to try and teach kids how to drive responsibly before they get their license. That's why we have speed limits. Because if you didn't have speed limits, people would be wrapping themselves around trees all over the place. And so we've got to keep people going slowly. And it's hard for some young guys, I know, myself included. But because we have the standards, we have rules that support the standards. And that is loss of license, speeding tickets, fines. Those rules support the standard that supports the principle that supports the value of life. So let me talk about adolescence as well. So if we value our adolescents in the church, that's a key value. We want to look after them and keep them here and help them to become all that God wants them to be. We start to build in principles around every young person. They say that every young person needs 5 to 7 mature Christians who love them, invest in them, and journey with them through their adolescent years. Around the principles, we have standards like 5 to 7 mentors. Every young person needs that cloud of witnesses around them. Quality time being spent with our young people, letting them know we love them. And then we have rules, clubs like Adventurers, Pathfinders, Stormco. These clubs help to build into our young people the resilience and the qualities they need so that they can actually survive in this world today. We have child protection rules as well with AdSafe, because when a young person walks into this church, it should be the safest place on earth for a young person. Amen? They need to be looked after when they come to Sabbath school, and Pathfinders and Adventurers want to make sure they're safe. We need to talk about sexual health and safety and make sure that they understand their body is a beautiful gift from God. And we want to make sure they preserve their body and look after their body. And positive family narratives as well. So just building in as many positive things we can for a young person so they know they're loved and looked after as a group of people. We see the same thing even with God's law. When the lawyer asked Jesus, what are the two most important commandments? And Jesus said, well, how do you read the law? You tell me. And the lawyer said, love God with all your heart, soul, mind and strength, and love your neighbour as yourself. And Jesus said, yep, right on. He said, all the law and the prophets hang on these two basic principles, loving God and loving people. And it's the same thing with this. And so to summarise, the primacy of relationships and mentoring. Every young person needs us to believe in them, to love them, and to look after them. Peer-to-peer mentoring, if you've got solid, grounded young people in your church that love God and love the Bible, that's such a valuable asset to have as a church because they'll keep the other kids going. Adult to youth mentoring as well, sitting down, spending time with them. Even youth to adult mentoring. Let the young people tell you what their life is like. Let them mentor you about 2025 and about school life. Let them, if you have trouble with your phone, ask a 15-year-old. They'll sort your phone out, no trouble at all. They know how to, they're right across all the smartphones. Your value is determined when the time you spent with a young person brings both of you closer to Jesus Christ. And every adolescent needs 5 to 7 mentors. So I want to finish up today with a lovely passage where Paul is talking to the church in Thessalonica. And he uses these lovely illustrations. He says, as apostles of Christ, we could have been a burden to you, but we were gentle among you like a mother caring for her little children. We loved you so much that we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well. And so Paul uses this lovely illustration of a mother caring for her little children. And you know, we often think of Paul as this kind of academic who's out there wrestling with philosophers in Athens and getting beaten up in Ephesus and going back the next day for another round. But Paul actually loved his church. Paul wept over his church. He treated them like his children. He devoted his life to the church. And down further in the same chapter, verses 11 and 12, he says, for you know that we dealt with each of you as a father deals with his own children, encouraging, comforting, and urging you to live lives worthy of God. And so Paul used these two beautiful illustrations of a mother's care and a father's encouragement in the way that he dealt with the church. And this morning, I just want to encourage you as a church family as well to see every young person who walks through that door as a precious gift. We only have them young for a period of time. They grow up really quickly. And their choice to stay or leave is determined by us. And I'll finish up just basically saying that adults need our support. Please continue to invest in every young person that comes through the doors. They are much more valuable than the sins they commit. God bless you all.